All right, we continue talking to Angel Gurria. He's the Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. At the launch of the organization's economic survey on South Africa yesterday, the Finance Minister, Malusi Gigaba, also spoke and reacted to some of the findings out of the economic survey. Angel, one of the big issues, and I think perhaps South Africa not necessarily being alone in this, but, you know, it is a major growing problem, and that is the unemployment rate here in South Africa and trying to stimulate job creation. From having a look at your survey, I mean, what are we doing wrong? Why are there not jobs being stimulated in South Africa to bring this unemployment rate down?
There are several questions. One, of course, is that this is a country of SMEs, of small and medium enterprises. You should take a look at the regulatory context in which these SMEs are developing or sometimes not developing, their access to credit, their access to technology, and most importantly, the question of whether they are part of global value chains. That means whether they are connected to the rest of the South African economy or the rest of the world, for that matter. There's also the question of skills. Yeah. I already mentioned the matter of whether the skills with which the workforce is endowed or prepared as they go out of vocational training or universities, is it appropriate for what we are requiring? If there's no match between what the market is demanding and the skills, of course, you will have people who have a diploma but do not have a job. And then there's a question of investment. How much investment is around, and therefore how much new opportunities, how many new opportunities are being created by virtue of this new investment. That has to do with the level of confidence. That has to do with both political stability, with economic stability, with financial stability. So all these things are connected. What we attempt to do in our study is precisely to link them all up and make the point that they're mutually reinforcing. So, I mean, that's one of the recommendations, I suppose, given, and I think a lot of people that do own small businesses would have to agree with you, is that they find that there's no support. They find that there's too much red tape when doing business in South Africa, and it just hinders their growth, which, of course, hinders a company hiring more people and just growing more and more and more. So the recommendations that you've put forward, the minister's response, how did he feel about some of these recommendations? I think the minister was very supportive of our findings. Second, he made the point correctly that already some of these concerns had been addressed by his 14-point plan. So therefore there's convergence with his views as well as our recommendations. And then it's a lot about implementation. Yeah. Because you can have very well drawn out plans, but the execution has to be appropriate. There also has to be a question of trust. There's, you know, the crisis left us a legacy of low growth, of high unemployment, of growing inequality, which is a problem in South Africa. It's not only in South Africa, but in South Africa, it's a serious problem. And high inequalities can be an obstacle to growth. And then there's a question of the trust in the institutions we built over the last 100 years. And that's, you know, that's a very serious problem because it makes it more difficult to make the government actions work and stick.
If you have a look, you mentioned the 14-point plan, and I think it really has been received with mixed reviews, this 14-point plan of our minister. Some people feeling that it doesn't necessarily work towards the current situation we find ourselves. When I say the current situation, I say downgrades by various ratings companies. We as South Africa are in a recession at this point in time, and many other issues. We've got our interest rates that we saw being dropped quite surprisingly at the last meeting. So there are many issues that people are very, very worried about, suggesting that the 14-point plan doesn't necessarily work towards our current situation we find ourselves in. Do you agree, or are you quite optimistic about these plans?
Well, first of all, let me say on the question of interest rates, the central bank, which has to be an independent central bank with independent directors, basically has to take a hard look at inflation. Inflation, that's why you call inflation targeting, which means the main aim of the central bank should be to make sure that people have purchasing power by trying to bring down inflation. You do that by having a system of interest rates which will be vigilant of inflation. But then you mentioned the question of the ratings. The ratings are done by independent agencies. The rating agencies basically have to define or calculate the level of risk that there is for a particular issuer of bonds or securities to default or not default. And therefore, this is what they do. This is a service that they provide for all the investors. This is what they do all over the world, in every country. Now, in the case of South Africa, the way to get your ratings back up is precisely by staying the course in terms of the fiscal consolidation, bringing the deficit down, bringing the accumulated debt down, and then doing the structural reforms that we talked about that will allow for the economy to pick up. And of course, then you will have a practically mechanical, automatic increase in the ratings, which will lower the price of the debt.
Yeah. All right.
Now,
I'd love
related to the 14-point plan, there was a beginning. It was a beginning. It's not meant to resolve all the problems of South Africa. It was indicative. The minister has been in office only a few weeks.
Yeah. All right. I wish I could continue, but I've gone into the 8 o'clock news. But I think you've given us a lot to think about. I know that the report and the survey is out there for all to read, but thank you so much for your time. Joining us there in our Pretoria studios is Angel Gurria. He's the Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. You will be able to find that survey, which was launched yesterday, summing up that slow growth and high unemployment are weighing on social progress in South Africa. And then South Africa really needs to deepen its integration within the SADC region, where we didn't even talk about in finding solutions for economic growth. Go to the website, oecd.org/eco, and you'll be able to find that survey there. All right, that's where we wrap it. It's time for your news at 8.